Join us today as we dive into the secrets of Hill House and try to uncover everything that's been hidden in the pages of this classic novel. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son, and today, guests, talk about fantasy, science fiction, horror, and other nerdy things that we enjoy. I'm Jim, the father of this channel, and I'm glad to have you here. If you enjoy what you see today, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we hope you will. And my wonderful guests with me today, they have their own booktube channels as well. Be sure to check them out. You're going to hear about them in just a moment. If somehow this is the first time that you've seen us do one of these, but we've talked about books before here. We all love books, and we're going to have a great discussion on The Haunting of Hill House today. Before we dive in, we'll make sure you know who they are. You know me. Derek, tell them who you are.
Hey, everybody. Derek here. Been on the show a few times, and so hopefully either you recognize my voice or name, but one half of D&J's Epic Quest, primarily a Malazan-focused chapter-by-chapter read-through podcast.
I've been thinking about you recently because yesterday I got back into Malazan. I think you saw my post on it.
I did.
Dancer's Lament. Holy crap, that one's good. I've said that about every Malazan book, though.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap, that's good. So it's really nice to get back into it. And Matt, welcome again. Tell us who you are.
Well, I'm Matt. I have a booktube channel, Go Read Books, where I talk about books, fantasy, science fiction, horror, and some other things. And I've enjoyed being with these guys a couple of times in the past, and we just love talking about books.
We all kind of live in the same lane of books, even though, Derek, you focus on Malazan. You like a lot of the same genre, fantasy and horror. And I haven't talked sci-fi with you much, but you were on to talk about Dune. So I think you do get into that stuff too. And I know Matt does. You feature a lot of the same kind of books. What's a little overwhelming about being booktubers is how many books are out there to try to talk about. It's a never-ending list, and we can keep going and going and going. And I know a lot of people get really caught up in always trying to feature the newest book, the latest book. Maybe also, and we all do a little bit of this, getting into the self-publishing and indie books too. A lot of these new things that are out there. But we should not overlook the classics, because just because it's old doesn't mean everyone's read it. And so we're gathered here today to talk about The Haunting of Hill House, which was published all the way back in 1959, written by Shirley Jackson. And it's so good that people still talk about it. Netflix still brought out a show not too long ago, inspired by it. It continues to impact the various things in horror and related genres. So this book, our general thoughts on it, for me, I'm just going to say I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was a great book. I don't read nearly as much horror as I do fantasy and sci-fi. So when I do dive into something a little more scary, into the paranormal, whatnot, I want it to be good. This did not disappoint me. This was good. It was thought-provoking. It had some depth to it. I think we're going to have good meat to talk about here today. Matt, what did you think of the book?
Well, to quote you, crap, that was good. That was a good book. I really enjoyed it. I have read a little bit more horror. Horror, I don't know that I featured on my channel quite as much. I'll talk about when I read a certain book, but I have enjoyed horror. Now, I'm still new to horror within the last couple of years, but I have tried to read more. I've read a good bit of Stephen King, as well as some others that I'm trying to find as I go. And a couple of books that I read last year, in the past 2 years anyway, were Gothic horror classics, Dracula and Frankenstein. And every time I would see people talking about those books, they would also bring up this book. And so I'm glad, I believe you are the one who suggested this book.
Yep.
And I'm glad you did, because it's one that I have been wanting to read. And I enjoyed it. Atmospheric. It delivered on all the things that I would have wanted it to.
Something it shares with Dracula and with Frankenstein as well, even though it's not nearly as old as those. It's not a book that's gonna break your toe if you drop it. It's a fairly concise, tight, well-written novel. You don't have to be 1,000 pages to be incredible. And neither are those classics. They're not all that long, but they're good. Right. What about you, Derek? Totally disagree with us and it was trash?
No, I don't disagree. I think I would probably say out of the three of us, I probably liked it the least, but that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. But I think I maybe liked it for different reasons than you two. I think I really liked the way people talked. Just reading that type of dialogue, I enjoyed. It was just stepping back in time. It was neat, and yes. It made me think of like movies from that time. Have you guys watched the most recent season of Black Mirror yet?
I have not.
Okay. So they have an episode in there where they are like remaking an old movie from like the 30s, 40s, whatever it was. And it reminded me of that in a way, just a different pace of life and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. But I'll also just chime in to say, I'm glad you feel like you have some different takes on the book and didn't feel exactly as we did, because that makes the episode a little more interesting. Every time one of us says, and this was good, and the others go, that's kind of boring. So it's good. We've got a diverse range of things to talk about here. But I do value what you just highlighted, hon. It's really a slice of what Americana was back at that time. We've got authors who will try to set things back in an early period, and maybe they capture that. The TV show phenomenon Stranger Things, one of the things it's got going for it is how it's so firmly planted in the 1980s. And they've done a great job of reminding people of what life was like back then. But this one, well, it's just placed right where it was written. 1959, and really oozes how life really was at that time to a certain degree. And not for everybody, but for people of the particular demographic that are featured in this book. Yeah, I thought it really did capture that well.
I agree.
I wasn't alive back then, so it's a little harder for me to say.
Well, I don't think any of us were. Not quite that far back. I'm just chuckling because I just done that whole thing about how it'll be nice that we don't all agree. And then as soon as I finish, Matt goes, I agree.
Well, and I think I think what Jim, and what I was saying I agree on, I think what Jim was saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but where other people try to emulate, you can tell what they're going for. Modern shows or modern books try to bring back that nostalgia or how life was. Well, this, you're just put in the middle of it, and you can see what those other things are trying to do, and how they're, you can tell that other people has taken and used this as a model to go back to. And I can see why, because it was done so well. Not that I remember this time period. Obviously I don't, but I feel like we see where they were headed, where other people were headed, and they did a good job.
Yeah, I just had a moment of, man, how old does Derek think I am? Holy cow. I got to start dying all this, I guess.
I think you're a little younger than my parents, but I guess I'm not entirely sure how old you are.
Well, when this was written, I don't think my parents had even met yet. So it's, 59's back there a little ways. But yeah, I'm a lot closer to it than you were. Again, it's a reminder of the value sometimes of reading things that are older, especially when they're set at the time that they were written, because you get to really experience a slice of life in a way that you can't as well if you're just setting your book back at that time, but you're in the 1990s or 2010s or wherever you were when you tried to do it. It's just not quite the same.
Yeah. And I also do agree with Derek. I loved the talk back and forth, the conversation, all of that. The dialogue was done very well. At no point during reading it did I. Sometimes you can read heavy dialogue books and get a little bored or kind of want to skip past some of the dialogue. I never felt that way in this. I was fully locked in for all of it.
This book really doesn't waste time with a bunch of exposition anywhere. It's just the events are happening. You had a little bit at the very beginning to set the table of what we're about to read, but then they all show up at the house. And from there, it's just, what do they experience? What do they talk about? And it just keeps moving. Pacing was pretty good from there. So even the dialogue is just fantastic, whether they're in the midst of something happening or they're talking about what happened or they're talking about what might happen. It just moves along really well.
Right. And I also enjoy one of my favorite aspects about a book is especially if it is written with what sometimes they call beautiful or purple prose. And I felt like this had it. In fact, that was part of what it reminded me of Dracula, it reminded me of Frankenstein, because the prose it doesn't feel modern. It feels set in its time, but written in a very beautiful way.
I thought Shirley Jackson really shows a lot of respect for the reader in one particular aspect of the book, and that is she leaves a lot of ambiguity in what's really going on. She doesn't put it in black and white what exactly has happened. Did you guys notice that too? Because I thought she really did a nice job of building the tension. There's a lot of psychological tension, not just supernatural tension in the book because of the choices she was making. Did you guys feel that, or was that just me?
I would say yes. And that was, from what I remember, because it's been, I don't know, maybe a month now since I finished this in that neighborhood. That was probably one of the things I feel like I struggled with the most. Where maybe I'm sure it's just a personal preference type thing, but I would have liked a little bit more of a clear answer one way or the other. If it's, maybe another clue here and there. It doesn't have to be just spelled out for me, but just something a little more, I think would have been helpful for me.
Okay. Matt?
I've seen you talk about this maybe on social media or somewhere, or maybe in these questions about the ambiguity. I think I had a completely different understanding of what was going on, completely different. There was a psychological buildup, absolutely, but I never once questioned, and I don't know if maybe I missed something or maybe I was supposed to miss it. I don't know. I never once questioned what was going on in the story wasn't real. And in fact, I thought all the characters believed that as well, that they knew this was supernatural. They knew they didn't know why or they didn't know how, but they knew that this wasn't in their heads. They knew it was actually happening because there were multiple characters seeing the things at the same time. And generally speaking, at least in things that I've read, when the author is trying to show maybe more ambiguity and is this actually happening, it's only in one person's mind, not everybody's mind. But it seems like all the characters pretty much agreed that, nope, this is a ghost and we don't like it.
I am so glad you went there because I'm going to go somewhere with that. I mostly would agree with you, except for the character of Eleanor. Because as we get further into all of this, and the things have been happening, that, yep, everybody's aware. These things are happening. The house is doing things. There's stuff going on that's inexplicable. But then Eleanor starts experiencing things of her own.
Right.
That aren't happening to everybody else. And that's where I'm like, you could make a case for the house has connected with her, whatever spirit, possession, whatever. It's doing more to her because of perhaps her background, things that make her a little more susceptible. Or it could be her background and things that make her a little more fragile have led her to have a psychological break because of what's happened. And the book does not clarify, because either one of those could justify what ends up happening with her character.
I completely understand. And I didn't see that while I was reading it. And it's interesting. And this, I'm not coming at this as argumentative. I like the fact that you bring that out, because I saw when you gave, was it A or was it B? Well, I thought it was A the entire time. I never even considered B. I thought that what was happening is the house was making a more of a connection with Eleanor, and the things she experienced that others weren't experiencing. I did notice that, but I thought that was possession, in the realm of possession, and it never occurred to me that this wasn't anything but real. That was just my. But I'm
part of what I love about it, because you could go either way. And
right. I'm a very gullible reader. If the author is trying to make me think something, I'm going to think that.
Derek, where would you fall on this with Eleanor's character? Was she completely being manipulated by the house, or is some of this just in her head, reacting and crumbling because of the house?
I almost feel like fall somewhere in between, because there was times where I felt like the other three were almost like ganging up on her. I guess I don't know, like, if gaslighting her is the right term, but just making her think that this stuff wasn't real.
She seemed to feel that way as well.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe I'm almost somewhere in between.
That is so well said, because the author did a beautiful job of giving us how Eleanor is feeling, and not necessarily because we're seeing it through Eleanor's perspective. It's not necessarily the reality. Like, were they ganging up on her? Were they gaslighting her now? I don't think so. I think they were still being just like they had been all along, and we're seeing how Eleanor is viewing stuff now, which is not the house doing that to her. I think that's her own psyche struggling because of everything that's happening, and she can't take it. But that's my perspective. You know, the fact that there's different ways to view it is what makes this such a great book, I think.
Right. I love that you brought this up, because that's a part of the. I like going back and rethinking about a book in a different way than what I was thinking about it when I read it. I think that adds layers onto the enjoyment of the story. I enjoyed it while I was reading it when I thought it was just supernatural horror, but now I can go back and rethink some things. And, well, was that really happening? Does she really think that way? That adds a lot to the story for me.
Yeah. Let's dig in to Eleanor just a little bit more, because while they're all important characters, she kind of becomes a focus character as we get further into the book. But we got a little more of her past at the beginning than we got from most of the other characters. So it's kind of designed for us to partly follow along with Eleanor through this experience. Her situation that she comes to this from sounded a little dysfunctional.
Right.
What did you guys catch from that?
You know, I don't remember a lot of specifics about her home life. Because I was just beginning the story, and I'm not sure I had connected everything that was going on. But I remember having the same feeling that she's not coming from a good place. She's, which, going back and rethinking, that may go into some of her mental state before she even arrived at the house. But yeah, I definitely remember thinking that, though I wasn't entirely certain all that was going on in her former life.
Yeah, what I recall from her former life, and this pretty much had ended just before the events of this story, is she had been a long-term caretaker for her father. I believe it was her father. Was it mother? I don't remember which parent. Derek, you remember which parent?
I feel like it was her mom.
Okay, might have been her mother then. And it was a long period of decline where she needed 24-hour care. She was doing everything for her mom, feeding her, cleaning her, getting her to and from whatever bathroom cares was needed. It was not a pleasant experience. Someone needed to do it. She pretty much had no life of her own. Okay, she's just that's what she does. She's there with her mom.
It was her mom.
It was the mom?
It was the mom.
Good. She's got a sister who's married and has a life that pretty much, as I read between the lines, dumped responsibility for her mother on this other one, on Eleanor. So Eleanor never stood up for herself saying, hey, someone's got to help me with this. It's not fair that I'm the one doing it. She just did it. Kind of was trapped by it. But that's recently ended. Somehow in the midst of that, she did buy a car partly. So she split the car with her sister and brother-in-law. They co-own it, but Eleanor, that's part of the bit to start the story, is Eleanor wants to take the car to go to this thing. And I got the impression they had more than one car, her sister and brother-in-law. So it wasn't like it's the only car, but it's the only one Eleanor has access to. So she's going to take the car to go to this, and they don't want her to go. They're kind of controlling. They're not giving her any credit. She has no life. She's been taken advantage of, and she's never really stood up for herself, is kind of what I got in the makeup for this person. And finally, she just says, I'm doing it. And she goes. And deep down, she's still terrified this is all going to fall apart. They're going to come. They're going to take the car back. She's going to be in trouble. That's the Eleanor I see. And this is a grown woman?
Right. That's exactly what I think. I wasn't seeing the full picture of. It's almost like she was being treated more like a child. Mm-hmm. And even she thought more like a child. Yet she's a grown woman, and she stole the car, but she partly owned the car. And into the book, it talked about her stealing. When she admitted what had happened, she talked about stealing the car. It was just some of that just didn't all make sense to me at the time.
Yeah, in the back of her mind, while she knows she can justify taking the car, she still feels a little like she stole the car.
Right.
Derek, did this bring any thoughts for you as I'm rehashing that?
The whole car thing is probably what I remember most from the beginning of the book and how big of a deal it was. I guess I kind of felt like it was the only car because I think the sister was like, oh, well, what if I have to go to, this appointment? What if I don't remember, maybe she had a kid or something like, well, what if the kid gets sick and we got to go to the hospital, that type of deal. And she's like, well, I need to go do this for me, and I was glad when she did it. Thinking about that, it made me think about how the doctor was sending letters out, right, to these people. And just like now you would just send a text. Oh, here's the written directions to where you need to go. Take this road for 120 miles, turn left on County Road 44, and now you would just Google it on your phone and get the directions. So that was kind of one of those other things from, stepping back in time that I liked.
Mm-hmm. So just since I'm kind of on an Eleanor tear here, I want to go to the finishing part of Eleanor, because we get all the way to the end, and there's some beautiful storytelling here. The way this is written, that the car was so significant at the beginning, and the car ends up really significant at the end. I don't think that's an accident. Okay, that's the way the story was crafted.
No pun intended. No accident.
Oh man. What do you see in the significance of Eleanor's final decision to just get in that car, go, and of course, knowing how it ends? Is she finally free? Is this a complete end of a psychological breakdown? Was she possessed and that forced her to do this, following a pattern of things at this house? Where do you fall on how that ended?
I feel like I wasn't sure if she was totally in control of that decision. I guess I don't know if I would go so far to say that she was possessed, but I don't think she was in the right frame of mind for sure.
Yeah, that's fair point to say that one way or another she wasn't in a right state of mind. Matt, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going back and just kind of scanning over what had taken place. When I read it, again, as we've already stated, I wasn't looking at it from psychological. I was looking at it as possession. In fact, there at the end, she comes to herself and wants to stop, but it's too late. And I can go back and I can see that being a mental breakdown. I prefer supernatural horror over psychological horror myself. So I like to just think it was all supernatural. And that's what it definitely seemed to me at the time. But you can definitely tell the, and going back and reading, I don't want to, if I can take the liberty to read from the book, she's talking to herself. She's in the car. They can't turn me out or shut me out or laugh at me or hide from me. And I wonder how much of that is all the people that's actually around her, even going back to her sister and brother-in-law as well. I won't go. The Hill House belongs to me. With what she perceived as quick cleverness, she pressed her foot and put foot down hard on the accelerator. They can't run fast enough to catch me this time. And just going on. And she goes through all of this. And then she, at the last minute, she stops and doesn't want to do it, but she's already about to hit the tree. And so I definitely looked at that as possession. And then it released her there at the last moment, basically just to see what she's doing to herself. But there is also a level of terror if it wasn't real, if it was just all happening in her mind, and there's nothing she could do to stop it.
Yeah. Definitely the perspective I ended up feeling the most out of this is that the house messed with all of them, found she was the most fertile ground, and pushed all of her triggers. But I don't think it ever possessed her. It drove her to this.
That might be a better word.
She had drove again, kind of thing. So she has a psychological break that the house triggered. She makes the choice to go flying away. She's got things in her head that are not reality, but they're what she sees things as now. And yeah, right at the end, she's like, what am I doing? Kind of has that brief moment, but nope, too late. Yeah. Because then the denouement of the story is basically they're all going, what the heck? We had no idea she was reacting like we all. It didn't make sense to them. None of them realized how severely she was being triggered by this house.
See, I think they did. Like, I feel very differently in that because all these different events that happened in the house, I felt like the other three thought that Eleanor was exaggerating things, making it worse. So like that they didn't see things as bad as she did. That they just downplayed all of this. And I feel like maybe that's kind of what maybe would make her, I don't want to say go crazy, but I guess that's kind of the word I would use right now.
Triggering. It was triggering for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, they had a bit of a wake-up call when she went climbing up that, whatever, was it on the exterior of the house that she was actually climbing up?
I visualize it, and this may be part because of the Netflix adaptation. I felt like she was on the inside, but very high up. Like this is a huge room, and it seems like there was a scene in the Netflix where something like that, not the exact scene because they were doing their own thing, but something like this happened, that they were inside the house, but very, very high up.
Okay.
On a vaulted ceiling.
And she's not connecting with how dangerous this is, with where she really is at. And the one guy, not the professor, but the other guy, goes
Luke,
up.
right?
Luke, thank you. Goes up to bring her down, to get her there. But I think that was their wake-up call to she's not well. So this is not good. And then it's very shortly after that the climax happens. Enough about Eleanor for a minute. We're saying that she was triggered, that the haunting did this to her, and it impacted everybody, but then really zeroed in on her. Okay, so what role does Hill House itself play as a character in this novel? What do you think?
So there is another gothic horror tale. It's not very long, short, by my mind just went blank on his name. Fall of the House of Usher. Who did the Fall of the House of Usher?
Poe. Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe. And so the way he talks about the House of Usher. Of course, I know the house is the family, but it's also the house, as you see in that particular story. I felt very similar with the way the author talked about this house, because that house operated almost as a character with a lot of emotions and movements and noises in the house. And the same with this house. The very opening paragraph of this book goes into a beautiful description of the house, beautiful in a setting a scene type of way, just talking about how everything's lined up, talking about the bricks, but also leaving room for something very eerie. And from that point on, I kind of had my thoughts on the house being a character. And I think you see that because there's times when Eleanor's looking at the house and it's almost like the house is looking back at her. And you see this continue throughout the story, which I really enjoyed that element.
Derek, I'd like to know, do you see the house as truly having agency, making choices to do these things, or is the house just the house and it is a paranormal location and things happen? How did you read it?
I don't know. I hate to sound like I'm just kind of in the middle of everything on this with this, but I guess I didn't really read it as a character a whole lot. The descriptions and everything I liked, because it was pointed out a lot how like the angles of the house were not right, things like that. The cold spot in the house, or it was like, what was it, like 12 degrees colder or something like that. I don't know, but I don't really believe in like paranormal stuff, ghosts and that type of thing. So it's hard for me to think this is just a place where that type of stuff happened either. I don't really know what to think. So I'm not going to say I'm in the middle of it. I don't really know what to think.
I don't believe in ghosts either, but in the books we read, sometimes the ghosts are presented as real within the story. So that's all I mean by when I say things like that. I don't believe in actual ghosts.
Suspension of disbelief for this story. Yes. Well, I really felt it was kind of both. The house is this unique entity rooted in its past, but somehow it kind of was twisted from the moment it was built.
Yeah.
And yet now chooses to do things. I don't think it's just you're here and you experience it like a carnival haunted house. It's choosing to do things, especially when we see how it seems to poke and prod Eleanor more than it does the others. I mean, that's a choice. Bad house. So let's talk about the beginning of that house then. We got the Crain family that builds this thing. And my thought here is, did the house infect the family? And so they ended up badly because of the house? Or did the house end up as it is because this family wasn't right in the first place? The book doesn't answer this. What's your take?
I would say that the book doesn't answer that, and it's. I would say we're supposed to have that question, but I don't think we're ever given. I don't know that we're ever even pushed in a certain direction of what we should believe, which I think which is good writing, that you can make multiple assumptions out of it. That's just how I felt. I can see it being both ways, but I don't really have any evidence to back up either one.
Sure. Derek, you gonna fall somewhere in the middle?
I think the only, not this time, I don't think.
All right.
I think I would lean that it was probably more so the house. And the only reason I would think that is that it's like a bigger deal than that, because on the way to the house, Eleanor stops in that town that's a few miles outside. I don't remember what the name of the town was. But even there, everybody, it felt off there. You know, nobody was very friendly, kind of rude, standoffish, that type of deal. You know, she went to the diner and got a cup of coffee and is talking to the waitress and is just, you know, just kind of off-put by things. So I don't know. It feels like to me that maybe the house is like the epicenter of it and it's just radiating things out from there. You know, but as far as that being like a concrete thing, I don't know. But I would lean maybe more that way.
You know, normally houses don't just go bad. It's a mystery here. What exactly happened here? Why did it happen? Why does it perpetuate? I mean, it impacted the Crain family for decades, and one might say is still involved. I mean, Luke is now related to whoever actually owns the house still, so it's still impacting owners. It's kind of strange. But speaking of kind of strange, and you mentioned the people in the town being kind of rude. How about that groundskeeper and housekeeper, the husband, wife, who were like rude, but also very entertaining? I don't know if we were supposed to be entertained, but I found them very entertaining characters. What'd you think of those two?
I don't remember a lot of interactions with the man. You had the beginning interaction when he welcomed is not a great word used, unwelcome, but he met them. But then the wife there throughout the stay. Again, I feel like these are some things this is the first time I've ever read this book, but I feel like we've seen this in other things. Feel like we've seen the unwelcoming groundskeeper or the unwelcoming matron in the home or the community that is suspicious of all the outsiders. And I don't know that this author was the first one to do that. She could have made it popular, and now we see more people have done it over and over again. I found that interesting that so much of this felt familiar, like you're talking about the groundskeepers. And I don't know that I was nearly as entertained by them. Not that I don't think they were well written. I guess I took them more as just rude people that you want to spend the least amount of time around as you can. But I can definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, their livelihood is connected to this house. So they're here, but they're doing just the job. The housekeeper probably was not supposed to remind me of this, but I was channeling Frau Blücher from Young Frankenstein. If you've seen that movie.
It's been a long time.
She's same kind of stiff mannerisms, you know, and just does what she does and you will like it, you know, kind of thing. And I clear at 10. You know, she only has so many answers to everything. Interesting characters, but apparently don't experience the things that happen at the house.
They wouldn't stay at night. They wouldn't come at night, though. And that's something, I'll say that's something that Netflix dove a little further into, that they wouldn't come at night because they did experience things and they didn't like it. And they felt the worst things happened at night. Now, I'm not saying that's what this author was looking to do, but I know they played around with that a little bit more, that the groundskeepers, they were off the premise before sundown because they knew what the house was and they didn't want to experience it.
Now, interesting. They knew there was something off with it and didn't want to experience it, but I never got the sense that they were afraid of the house.
Are you talking about in the book?
Right, in the book.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, that the show went a little further and played a little more into that. told a little more than what the book actually told.
Which we would say is not canon then.
Absolutely.
A choice, an adaptation choice.
Right.
All right.
I wondered, just because they both felt very like robotic to me. Yeah, you got very minimal answers, especially out of the housekeeper. Like you said, I clear at 10. She just kind of repeated things, so it made me wonder. Is she somehow like a part of this? And yeah, they're not there at night. Are they somehow pulling strings or manipulating things to make this happen? And like you said, like, I mean, I don't believe in ghosts in like the real world or anything like that, but in a story, like if that's what it is, like then I can get on board with that. But it just made me wonder if they were, how real they were, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Jim?
Well, I thought they were just, they knew there's something messed up with the house, but they're not afraid of it because they know how to handle it. They come, they do their job, and they go home. And as long as they don't mess with the house, it doesn't mess with them. That's kind of how I took them. So they're no nonsense. They do their thing. They're good with that. They do no further because that's not what they're hired for. Yeah.
I think this is one of those times when I'd usually read a book before I watch a show or a movie. I didn't do that this time. I watched the Netflix show, which again has very little to do with the book, but there are still some connections. And so I feel like I may have drawn some conclusions while reading the book because I knew what the show had done.
Possibly.
Maybe even the supernatural aspect that I'm talking about as well, because the show was supernatural. There were also psychological things, but it was very much supernatural. So I think I may have, I don't know about spoiled myself, but I think I may have allowed the show to influence the way I read the book.
And see, I still have virgin eyes. I have not watched any of it yet. I'm going to be watching the 1999 movie adaptation. I don't think I'm going to watch the really old one from the 60s, but I'm going to watch the one with Liam Neeson because give me some Liam Neeson. I'll take him anytime.
Right.
And then I'm going to watch the Netflix adaptation that's just inspired by. But so, yeah, all I have to go on is the book. So you might be onto something with it, just coloring the way some of these things read for you. Which is not to say you're seeing them wrong. It just gives you a perspective.
Right.
I don't remember anything from the show. I thought maybe I remembered the end a little bit, and then I'd messaged you about it, Matt. And
don't say it out loud.
How long has it been since you watched this? I'm not going to talk about what happened. How long has it been since you watched the show?
It was probably shortly after it came out, whenever that was.
Okay, see,
so it's been a while.
I just watched it last year. I watched. I'm not trying to change our conversation to being all about Netflix, but I watched several of that showrunner's shows back to back, and that was probably the middle one that I watched. And so it was very recently when I watched it. Which is why it influenced my reading, I think.
Gotcha.
Sure. When was that on Netflix? Oh, I looked it up. 2018. So it's still been a little while. But, when it first came out, so Derek, it would be fading for you. But if you just watched it, Matt, yeah, it's going to be fresh. So we haven't talked about Dr. Montague at all yet. And there's an interesting character. His life's passion is to be able to have verifiable data, to be able to prove the possession of a house, the haunting could truly be a real thing. To be able, so how he decides to do it is find one that there's a legend that it's haunted, and then let's just go live there for a while and see what happens. Okay, it's not a very scientific approach, but it's certainly made for good drama.
Right. And you were talking about the groundskeepers being the entertaining couple. For me, it was Montague's wife and whoever this guy is to her, which felt weird to me.
Alfred, what was that guy's name?
Their relationship felt weird to
Arthur.
me. In my mind, I'm like, Doctor, you might want to check them out.
Yeah, if this was a more modern book, those two were having an affair.
Right.
Totally. Now, in 1959, they still might have been having an affair, but there was definitely a weird vibe between them.
There was a weird vibe there.
Dr. and Mrs. Montague, is that a dysfunctional relationship? They seem to describe it in the book that they get along great, except she has some idiosyncrasies that he normally just rolls with. She seemed a little interesting.
Right. I guess if it worked for them, it worked for them. But
she's way more into the occult than he is. He's just scientifically trying to prove something. She's like got her Ouija board, and
Right.
let's commune with the spirits. Ay, ay, ay.
It wasn't a Ouija board, though, was it? It was something, I can't remember what it was called.
Well,
it was like
It
one, but it
was,
was,
but it wasn't. It had that device, but used in a different way.
I had never heard of they talked about. I want to even say did they mention compare it to a Ouija board or something like that?
I think they
They
did.
did.
Yeah.
I don't know. I try to stay away from the occult as much as possible, so
Yeah.
I don't know. Not familiar with a lot of those terms.
Yeah, there is a name for that thing. A planchette something. I forget exactly
that
the
sounds
name.
familiar.
Yeah.
Planchetta?
And the Ouija board is basically a game version to make it so kids can get together at their sleepover parties and do this. It's still a horrible idea, but that's what that was invented. It was already used as a way to commune with the beyond or to commune with spirits going back farther. So she's really into this stuff. And I got the sense her husband tolerates that because he loves her. He doesn't believe in that stuff at all. That's all parlor tricks, smoke and mirrors. Okay, I'll humor her. But when she and Arthur try this stuff, it seems like the house did talk to her. Is that what you guys caught? There was some that was just nonsense, but there seemed to be some stuff there that she couldn't have known.
Yeah, I don't remember a bunch either.
I'm drawing a blank on the specifics of what it told her. I remember that started to say something. I can't remember what exactly it was. So it seems like Dr. Montague is more interested in hauntings from an academic point of view. She's interested in the commercialization of what people make it, or the more popular looking at it through a Ouija board or trying to commune with spirits and things like that. Seems like he wants to do it for an academic exercise. She wants to do it to experience whatever it is she's trying to experience.
Yeah. All right. So I agree with you. I'm glad you brought those two characters up, though. They were definitely a little bit of comic relief in the midst of a serious story, too. Just over the top characters.
Right.
Arthur's got his gun, because what's he going to do? Shoot a ghost? Just, oh boy. I guess just a couple last things that come to mind that I want to ask about before we wrap with some final thoughts. One is, and we talked about this lightly before, Shirley Jackson chooses as an author to leave a whole bunch of events unexplained. Not just what's happening to Eleanor's head or the house, but just a lot of events around this. She just doesn't give you clear answers. And so how does that affect a reader's experience? Derek, it sounds like for you, it lessened the experience, that there's too much left unanswered. Am I reading that right?
I didn't have a bad time reading it, but I'm just one of those types of people that I want to have at least have the crumbs that could lead me to an answer.
Okay. And Matt, you found this that much more interesting because of this style, right?
I absolutely did. I'm okay with not knowing certain things, because for me that sometimes it adds to the mystery. It adds to the horror aspect, because in life there are just terrible things that happen that we're not going to understand no matter what, at least here. And sometimes I'll accept that in a book. Now there may be some things that aggravates me not to know. I don't remember anything that left me wanting, not wanting more, but I didn't feel cheated out of anything.
And I feel more like you do, Matt. I respected and enjoyed the fact that there are things that are unanswered to a degree. We can't be 100% sure just what happened. Did everything that Eleanor experienced really happen? Or was some of it in her head? We can't know for sure. And we don't know the answer behind this house entirely. We have possibilities. There are crumbs laid out for us. We're left to draw some conclusions.
And unless I'm mistaken, Derek, aren't you a little more new to horror, some horror books?
That was probably, yeah. I mean, we read Dark Bloom, but this was probably the first traditional horror book that I've read.
See,
yeah.
and Jim, you may agree or disagree with this, but I would say that's more common in horror books. There are going to be some things that are left unexplained, than maybe in a fantasy where you're world building and you're trying to understand magic and you're trying to understand all these things. With horror books, a lot of times there's terrible things that just loose ends that never get tied up. It seems to be more common in horror.
I would agree with you, but I think it used to be more common than it is now. And I think that's reflecting a shift in what readers want. Because, Derek, I don't think you're so unusual compared to a lot of younger, more modern readers. They want more explained. We've seen its impact on fantasy as well.
Right.
The fantasy genre used to have a lot of things that just happened and you didn't know all the answers. And then it started having more where, okay, there was some things that aren't clear, but by the end of the book, it's all clarified. And now some authors get dinged because they hold the reader's hand all the way through. There are people who want to know everything all the way. And I'm not saying that's you, Derek, but there are readers like that. They don't
Because we know
want you
Malazan,
not guessing at all.
You know everything happening.
Yeah.
But it is rare to find a modern fantasy book, something written since 2020, where at the end of the book, there are still things left unexplained, unless it's, there's a sequel still coming. If it's the end of a trilogy or the end of the author has wrapped it all up nice and tight and put a bow on it. That's most common now. And that's too bad. I love being left with some openings for speculation. It's one of the things I love about the Wheel of Time. When you get to the final book, after 14 books plus a prequel, there's still some unanswered things that have left the fandom talking about these things for over a decade now. Still, what did that mean? And the author is dead, so Brandon Sanderson doesn't count. So Robert Jordan's dead. We can only speculate now. And it lets us keep talking about these things on and on and on. Just like we're still talking about The Haunting of Hill House, and it was written in 1959. Go on, Derek.
For me, it's a fine line. I mean, there's, like Matt said, Malazan. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of things in there that I'm probably not gonna know. But right now, with where we're at, it's just kind of trusting that a lot of those things are going to get answered. Now, in a one-off book, like that's just not going to be the case then. So I could be fine with some things not getting those answers, but I would have just liked a little more. That's just me.
Yeah, when you get to the end of Malazan Book of the Fallen, not everything is answered.
Uh-oh, spoiler.
But there's a reason for that. And it's because you will discover, and this is not a big spoiler, this is something you could already probably have figured out. You're not just getting one story in Malazan Book of the Fallen. You've got a bunch of different stories all woven together into things, and some of those stories aren't done when you get to the end of the book. There's a core story that does finish, so you won't be unsatisfied.
I don't think so.
I'm still finding answers to things after having read so many other books in the world of Malazan.
I know this isn't a Malazan discussion, but there are still, I still don't know what the core story is, and I'm on book 5.
Oh, book 5 takes a complete left turn, though, too. So, yeah, I love book 5, by the way. It's one of my favorite. All right, a last question I want to toss out at us here has to do with the impact this story has had then. How much do you think The Haunting of Hill House differs from modern horror tropes or aligns with it? Especially the haunted house subgenre. Is this the template that you think most authors follow, or is this really an outlier? What do you think? And Matt, you've read a lot more horror than I think either one of us, so I want to know what you think for sure.
Well, I am not by no means a horror historian, so I don't know what would have come first before this particular book. This is probably the oldest, this is definitely the oldest haunted house story I've read, and I can see so many influences from this book and other books that I've read. And I want to say this is probably a template. This is probably where they're drawing from. But there could be other things that I've not read that they could also be drawing from. But this feels to me, from the characters, from the house itself, I feel like there's so much that modern horror draws from this when they talk about a haunted house, when they talk about they hear something in the walls or outside the door. It's all here in The Haunting of Hill House, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like it has a great impact on horror today, and I'm interested to see what else it's impacted, how other many books it's impacted.
Derek, any thoughts?
I don't really think I have any basis to answer the question. So, really the first horror book that I've read. But I could see how it would be a good, I guess, foundation for books that came after it. I would imagine stuff written more recently would probably be a lot darker, gorier, that type of thing.
Speaking of, a couple of books that I know are directly influenced by The Haunting of Hill House, that are definitely inspired by it in ways because the authors have said so, would be Hell House, which came out in 1971. And people get these mixed up all the time because The Haunting of Hill House and Hell House don't sound that dissimilar. But that's Richard Matheson. And I've read some of his stuff. I haven't read Hell House. I've read other things he's done. But I know of the book. I looked at it for prep for this. And it's got that haunted house, but it goes much more into the visceral, graphic style instead of leaning into the psychological things like Shirley Jackson did. Some consider it a response to her book. Okay, you did it that way, I'm going to do it this way, But definitely there's a connection. But the bigger one that I didn't have to do any research to figure out is Stephen King's The Shining. Okay, when you talk about a haunted place, in their case it's a hotel, and you have the main character who is being impacted and directly influenced by the paranormal, the supernatural essence of this house, but at the same time it's screwing with his mind and he's having psychological things happening. That is so Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House, in a slightly more modern style. That came out in 1977. And you said you like King, Matt, so you've read The Shining, right?
Yes, and Derek, if you're at all interested in other books like this, that's the one I would suggest you read. I would recommend you read. I don't know how. I mean, it doesn't steal from Shirley Jackson here, but it does take some influences. And I would say, as you said, you made a statement that you would imagine modern horror is a little more gory, a little more dark, well, that's what The Shining is. And there's some slow burn parts to The Shining, but he definitely goes deeper into how dark something can get, how bloody something can get. So I don't know. Have you seen the movie The Shining?
I've not seen all of it. Me and my wife started to watch it, and I don't really remember where we left off. But
right, I enjoyed it, and I've not read a lot of Stephen King in this past year. I read a lot the couple of years prior to that. In fact, nearly I think 20 books I read, and I'm kind of on a King slump right now after I finished the
I'm the same.
But I am interested in reading more. But I really tried to read more of his older stuff.
Yeah, which is beautiful stuff. Red Rum. Okay. Yeah. So it's not a Stephen King episode either, but I'm curious now, what was the latest Stephen King book you have read, the most recent book, Matt?
I think it was the last Dark Tower book a year ago.
Okay.
I don't think now I could go over my list because I keep a list of what I read, and there may be something thrown in there, but I don't think so. I think the last Dark Tower book was and I've picked up several Stephen King books since then, and I haven't gotten very far. In fact, I do remember one specific now, a very earlier one that he wrote under his other pen name, The Long Walk, which I want to finish.
Yes.
Especially now that the movie's coming out, I want to finish it. Something happened. Well, I got to a certain point, probably as the story is really picking up, and I stopped. I don't know why I stopped, but I stopped, and I moved on to something else. I wouldn't consider it a DNF because I don't want to finish it. It just, for that particular moment in time, I needed to move on to something else. But I'll probably end up finishing that at least before I watch the movie because the movie looks really good.
Yeah.
I've seen that preview. It looks interesting for sure.
The next book on Stephen King, like I've been trying to read everything of his, but I hit a slump too. But the next one I'm going to read is Dr. Sleep, which is the sequel to The Shining. And I've heard it's fantastic. So
when you read that, let me know because that's on my shelf and that's another one that I want to read as well. But I have watched the movie.
I have not watched the movie. See, I try to keep my order right. All right.
I was just going to say, I did. You probably can't see this.
Oh, no. If you hold it in the right spot, I can. Yes,
Well,
we have always lived in the castle. Oh,
yeah,
Shirley
it's
Jackson.
another Shirley Jackson story that this made me want to find out what else she's written, and that was another one that I found. I think it's another haunted house story. So I ordered that off Pango Books.
Nice. All right, final thoughts, because that's really all I have planned for us to specifically talk about. Is there anything else you want to say about the book that we haven't covered? Derek, anything come to mind?
I would just say I'm glad I read it. I got to read something that's considerably older than I am. Just a different experience. And the one thing I really took away from reading it is just the different style of life back then, and it made me a little jealous because I just think about, those times they're like, oh, well, we're going to have a picnic out on the lawn and then, we'll have tea later and that type of thing. And, now everything's just go, 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 go all the time. And, it just made me appreciate the slowdown there.
I totally get what you're saying. Although I will add to that I think one of the elements that comes out of that is it was a great time to be male. It wasn't quite as pleasant for the women. They had a role. They had to stay in their lane or they were rocking the boat and life was hard. So, yeah, it would have been nice back
and
then.
I think that
or
comes
as
out
a
of this
woman
story
who
as well.
liked that role. Matt, I'm sorry. We talked over each other. What did you say?
I talked over you. I was saying I think that came out in this particular book. What you just said about women in their place in this particular time, I feel like that was addressed pretty well in this book.
Yeah, Shirley Jackson was definitely making a statement. And understandably, as she was a horror writer at a time where most women weren't authors at all. That was not what women did. Men were the writers. She proved them wrong. She can write. She can write pretty well.
Yeah.
Matt, you have any other comment there? Any last thing?
Not really any closing statements other than I think we've said this already. This just makes me want to read more classic horror. The three that I've read so far, with this one, Dracula and Frankenstein, I think I want to try at some point Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's one just that again. That's another one that always pops up with these particular stories, and so that's maybe very different. I have no idea, but I still think it's considered gothic horror. So I like that lane. I like that genre of books, classic books.
I'm pretty sure I read that, and I think the name of the book is actually a little bigger from back then.
I don't know.
But it was good. So I encourage you to pursue that.
Well, I have a friend that just read it. In fact, he was reading it around the time we were reading this, and it made me, hearing him talk about it, made me want to check it out.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I looked it up live. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, so that's what you'd be looking for. It's all the way back in 1886. Robert Louis Stevenson.
It's going to be very different on probably the prose and the way he writes.
You know what else Robert Louis Stevenson is famous for writing?
I know the name and I should know what you're going to say, but I'm drawing a blank.
I mean, I'm pulling this out of my head, but I'm pretty sure that's the author of Treasure Island.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Very different stories. Yeah. And that's cool. We get authors these days who focus so hard. They're a fantasy writer or they're a science fiction author. But there are still authors who multitask. Stephen King is one of them. Even though he does write some great horror, The Dark Tower is not horror. That's epic fantasy with a sci-fi Western blend. It's a weird genre matchup. Well, that's what we have, people. We hope you enjoyed our conversation about these books. Gentlemen, it's always great to get together with you. I loved hearing your different perspectives. You've enriched my understanding of the book. And hopefully all of them too. We didn't completely spoil it. So if somebody watched this and hasn't read the book, hopefully you're interested in reading the book now. There's a lot more to it that we didn't mention. I mean, we didn't even give them the name of the other key woman, which we won't.
I was thinking about that.
Secret. We're going to keep it secret. But a great story. We all appreciated reading it, enjoyed reading it for different reasons. The best stories are like that. Matt, remind them where they can find you if they want to know, they want to listen to you some more.
Go read books. GEAUX. Read books. kind of wearing my LSU fandom on my sleeve there.
There you go. There you go. YouTube is your primary place. Do you put it out on audio as well?
I do not. I haven't checked that out yet. The YouTube, I've actually been doing more on TikTok than I have YouTube lately, and I've been trying to work on doing Instagram as well. Twitter, Go Read Books, the same thing. So I pretty much keep the same name on all of the different platforms, and you can find me there.
Perfect. And Derek, where do they find D&J's Epic Quest?
YouTube, Twitter. We have a Blue Sky. Not terribly active on that. Just don't seem to get the engagement on there like Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I still call it Twitter. So
me too. I just can't tell people, yeah, I'm on X.
You're
Seems
on
illegal. Yeah.
You got to share that stuff.
Right. So again, thanks for being with us. If you have any thoughts on what any of us three gentlemen said, use the comment box, put it down there. If you have a question specifically for Matt or Derek, just put @Derek, @Matt, and I'll send them the question so they can respond. We love engagement. All three of us love when people who watch our content have things to say. Even if you think we were totally wrong about something, put it down there. We still value what you have to say. And again, hope you'll like and subscribe. Thanks for being with us all. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.